Hey guys, longtime boxing fan here, Mike Sr. I wanted to address something I hear quite often from Floyd Mayweather fans who claim that he's the best ever. They generally use two arguments to make that claim. The first argument is that he's undefeated, 50-0. The second argument is that he's beaten more world champions than any fighter in history. I think the claim is about 23, 25 world champions. To address the first argument, it's pretty easy for me to explain why it shouldn't be used as a major criteria for determining a fighter's greatness. It has to do with analyzing who they beat to get to that point of being undefeated. An example I could use is Ryan Garcia. Let's say Ryan Garcia from this point on until the end of his career fights nothing but lower top 10 contenders. He never fights Gervonta Davis. He never fights Teofimo Lopez. And he fights over-the-hill fighters as well. Well, if he remains undefeated and retires that way, I think you guys would agree that he should not be considered an all-time great or even a great fighter. That's not to say that Floyd hasn't beaten good or great fighters, but the point is you can't just look at the O and say he's undefeated, therefore he's the greatest. You have to look at who he beat. That is the major criteria that everyone should use in analyzing someone's greatness. Quality of opposition, who did he beat, what was their status when he beat them. The second argument about the world champions is a really superficial analysis of someone's greatness. The reason I say that is the sport and the way it's organized now is completely different than the way it was organized where we were judging fighters like Sugar Ray Robinson and Willie Pep in the 1940s and 1950s. Back then, you had 8 weight classes, and you had 1 world champion per weight class. So at any given time, the most champions you can have in boxing was 8. Now you have 16 weight classes, 4 belts per weight class. That is, I think, 64 world champions. So right now you can have 64 world champions in boxing. So if a fighter is competing today, he has so many more opportunities to become a world title holder than he did back then. So it really isn't a fair comparison when you say Floyd beat 23 or 25 world champions compared to whoever in the past. It's a completely unfair analysis. So that being said, you have to look at who he beat out of those so-called world champions, and then you have to compare the quality of opposition that he faced and how he performed against them compared to someone like Sugar Ray Robinson or whoever, Tommy Hearns, Ray Leonard. And that's really how you should determine where someone falls on the all-time great list. So saying that, I just want to look at, I put a list together here of some of the quality opposition that Floyd faced, and we'll go through the list real quick and we'll see how good were they. So we'll start with Genaro Hernandez. Good fighter. I don't believe that he was a lineal world champion. And remember, that is the criteria. When you compare his record, Floyd Mayweather's, to someone like Ray Robinson, when he beat a world champion, he beat the world champion. So someone like Genaro Hernandez, I really don't know if he ever held the Ring Magazine title. That is the belt that I use to determine if somebody was the legit lineal champion. I don't believe he was at 130 pounds when Floyd beat him, but either way, good fighter, decent fighter, a little bit past his prime when Floyd beat him. The next guy is Angel Manfredi. I really don't think he was an elite fighter, to be honest with you, and he certainly wasn't a world champion when we used that standard for a world champion. Diego Corrales. This is probably the best win of Floyd Mayweather's career. Excellent win. Diego was undefeated. I don't think he was considered the world champion at that time at 130, but he was definitely the top guy along with Floyd, so definitely good win. Jose Luis Castillo, he was the lineal world champion at lightweight, so Floyd gets credit for being the world champion at lightweight for beating him. However, many people thought he lost that fight, but he beat him in a rematch, so he gets good credit for that. Arturo Gatti was way past his prime. He was never a world champion, and I don't care what titles he held, he would not be considered a world champion in Ray Robinson's day. Arturo Gatti, as much as I love him, as entertaining as he was, not a quality fighter when it comes to comparing him to someone like Floyd Mayweather. He's not an all-time great. Oscar De La Hoya did the same thing to him, I think 5 years prior than Floyd did it. Zab Judah, he beat Zab Judah. Good, decent quality win. Judah was not the champion at the time, but he was the lineal welterweight champion not too long before that. Good win for Floyd. I wouldn't say it was a great win because Zab was never a great fighter, but it was a good win. Carlos Baldomir. Now, Floyd won the lineal welterweight championship from Carlos Baldomir, so he gets credit for winning the lineal real welterweight championship from Baldomir. However, anyone who knows who Baldomir is knows that he's probably the weakest welterweight champion in the history of boxing. He basically got there by chance. Zab Judah, he beat Zab Judah for that title. Zab Judah was completely undisciplined and gave the title away to Baldomir. I mean, credit for Baldomir for taking advantage of an undisciplined Zab Judah, but it is what it is. Not much credit for Floyd for beating that fighter. Credit for him for winning the world championship, but not much credit for the quality of opposition there. Oscar De La Hoya, good win, close fight. De La Hoya was past his best. I think it would have went a little bit differently if De La Hoya was younger and more in his prime, but good win. I wouldn't say great win. So far to me, the only great win on his record so far, as for the ones we went down the list, is Diego Corrales. Ricky Hatton, good win. I wish that fight took place at 140. I think Ricky Hatton gave him good pressure, and the ref kind of helped Floyd Mayweather out in that fight. But nonetheless, Floyd knocked him out, gets credit for that. Very good win. Not great, but very good win. Ricky Hatton, to me, cheated against Costa Tszyu. And I didn't think Ricky Hatton was ever an elite fighter. He had no jab. You need a jab to beat Floyd Mayweather. He just rushed in without a jab. Not really a way to beat Floyd Mayweather. Juan Manuel Marquez, I love Marquez, but he was a blown-up old lightweight. I'm sorry. Floyd doesn't get much credit for that. Sorry. Shane Mosley was way past his prime. I'm of the belief that Shane Mosley was never the same after losing to Vernon Forrest twice. Anyone who looks at his career will see that easily. Nonetheless, he beat him in dominant fashion, but this is a shell of himself, in my opinion. Miguel Cotto, I want to say it was a tough fight, and Floyd won a good fight. But again, Miguel Cotto was way past, I would say past his prime, definitely past his prime. That fight should have taken place in 2009 when Miguel was undefeated, when he was the #1 contender for Floyd Mayweather's Ring Magazine Championship belt, but it didn't take place then. It took place years later when Miguel was past his prime, and Miguel still gave him a good fight. Good win, not great. Alvarez. This is probably a great win. I don't know if it's a very good win or a great win, but it's definitely the second best win after Diego Corrales, or you can swap that. But the claim is that Alvarez was too young and not in his prime yet, didn't have enough experience. Either way, I didn't expect him to dominate Alvarez that way, and it looks very good in hindsight. Very good win. Marcos Medina, some people thought Floyd might have lost the first fight, and I don't think Medena's a great fighter. I think he's a tough, good, aggressive fighter, but I wouldn't claim that as a great win for Floyd. Pacquiao, this is a controversial one. So Pacquiao is a good win for Floyd. Obviously the best name on Floyd's record. However, you know the deal. 5 years too late. Manny was past his prime. Now, I'm not going to say he was shot, but he was past his prime. The time to make that fight was 2010. And to be honest with you, I don't see why people think that was an impressive win. He negated Pacquiao, so I guess you can say that was impressive. But as far as an impressive performance, it was not. It was not Corrales. It was not Canelo. It was just like, I did enough just to win this decision. I wasn't impressed with either fighter in that fight. Just a terrible fight. But best name on his record. To me, still, I think Corrales and Alvarez were better wins. And then the last fight he had was Berto. I'm not going to even talk about that. So there you go. Good wins, very good wins. I think there's two great wins on his record: Corrales and Alvarez. And then, I guess you can throw Pacquiao in there, but again, there's question marks there. So how does that compare? That's what you got to do, guys. You got to look at his record, analyze the fighters he beat, what was their quality when he beat them, because a name is just a name. For instance, Sugar Ray Robinson beat Henry Armstrong, but Armstrong was way past his prime. So even though that's the best name on his record, it certainly is far from the best win on his record. So these are the nuances of analyzing a fighter's career that people often fail to do. Now let's look at Sugar Ray Robinson's record a little bit briefly. And to be honest with you, I grew up in Floyd Mayweather's era. So I know pretty much all the fighters he fought. I know their quality. Ray Robinson had almost 200 fights. I don't know these names. I don't know their quality. I haven't seen most of them fight. But I can guarantee that a lot of them are better than Carlos Baldomir, and most of them are better than Marcos Medina. Yeah, I can guarantee that. Look at a guy like Bobby Dykes. Go look up that fight on YouTube. To me, it looks like Bobby Dykes is a better fighter than Medina. And Medina gave all sorts of trouble to Floyd Mayweather. So, Sugar Ray Robinson, look at his record. I think he's the best ever. So people saying Floyd's the best ever. At his peak, Sugar Ray Robinson was 129 wins and 1 loss at his peak, before he lost for the second time in his career I forgot his name. Oh, Turpin. So yeah, 129 wins, 1 loss. That's quite amazing. Now, some of the names that stand out to me, again, I don't know the fighters on his record as well as somebody who grew up in that era might, but the fighters who stand out to me, Gene Fullmer, amazingly tough, brutal fighter. Carmen Basilio, I think he's underrated. There's a lot of film on him. Tough, skilled, underappreciated fighter. To me, just as good as anyone on Mayweather's record, maybe withstanding Pacquiao. Joey Maxim, the light heavyweight championship. Anyone who saw that fight knows that was Ray Robinson's win, and the heat ruined it for him. He was well on his way to a victory. He had 2 more rounds, and it had nothing to do with Maxim's, very little to do with Maxim's opposition and punches. It had everything to do with the heat. Rocky Graziano, good middleweight, great middleweight. Randy Turpin, very, very tricky, difficult fighter. In some ways reminds me defensively of Floyd with the shoulder and the leaning back. Jake LaMotta, underrated fighter in my opinion, all-time great middleweight. Bobby Dykes, I mentioned him. Kid Gavilan, all-time great welterweight. Ray beat him in his prime. Tommy Bell, another great welterweight. Sammy Angot, another great welterweight. And then Henry Armstrong. So, you have to look at that, look at who he fought and compare them. To me, Ray Robinson, in addition to the quality that he showed with his skills, I think his record is way superior than Floyd Mayweather's when you dig into the record. So there you go, guys. That's my opinion. Let me know what you think. Thank you. Bye.